My husband just called to tell me he'd inherited millions and that I should pack my things and get out of his house. The sentence still hung in the air when I unlocked the front door. The brass handle was cold, unfamiliar, like I was trespassing instead of coming home. Inside, the hallway smelled of his cologne and fresh printer ink. The divorce papers were laid neatly on the console table, squared edges aligned with obsessive precision, a pen placed on top like a gift ribbon on a coffin. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the living room, each second loud enough to sound deliberate. Final. Certain. He stood by the window, back straight, chin lifted, already rehearsing the posture of a wealthy man who had upgraded his life. I read every page. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. I smiled, signed, and wished him luck. Because he thought the will had made him powerful. He had no idea it had actually made him vulnerable. I've always been the woman people overlook first and understand last. My husband used to introduce me at parties as the quiet one, smiling like my silence was a charming flaw instead of a decision. I learned early that when you speak less, you hear everything. Tone shifts, careless truths, the things people reveal when they assume you won't matter later. We met when he was drowning in debt and charm, the kind of man who tipped waiters generously with borrowed money. I was the one who balanced accounts, negotiated bills, stitched stability out of chaos. He called me his good luck charm. What he meant was useful. His family never hid their opinion of me. Too plain. Too calm. Too practical. At dinners, conversations curved around me like I was furniture. His aunt, though, the one who left him the fortune, watched me differently. She noticed who refilled glasses, who remembered details, who listened instead of performing. My husband thought patience meant weakness. He mistook my quiet for dependence. He believed I stayed because I needed him. But I stayed because I was learning him. And once you truly learn someone, you don't need to raise your voice to change their fate. The disrespect never arrived loudly. It came folded inside ordinary moments, small enough that no one else would have called them wounds. At dinners, he'd answer questions directed at me. "She doesn't really follow finances," he once said lightly, fingers tapping his glass, while I sat beside him balancing 3 accounts in my head. His friends chuckled. I smiled and took a sip of water, letting the lie drift past like smoke. He corrected my stories mid-sentence, not to fix facts, just to adjust tone, softening my humor, sharpening my opinions, reshaping me into someone easier to display. When I finished speaking, he'd pause a beat too long before changing the subject, as if closing a door. The first time his aunt visited, she thanked me for the dinner. He answered for me again. "She likes keeping busy." Likes. Later that night, he handed me a list of improvements for the house, written in tidy bullet points like notes for staff. His voice stayed gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it colder. I began to notice patterns, the way he glanced at me before making decisions, not to consult, but to confirm I wouldn't object. And I never did. Not out of obedience. Out of timing. The moment I understood him completely wasn't when he told me to leave. It was 3 weeks earlier, in a quiet hospital corridor that smelled faintly of antiseptic and lilies. His aunt had asked for me, not him. He arrived late, breathless, performing concern. She watched him the way a jeweler studies glass, pretending to be crystal. When he stepped out to take a call, she turned to me and said, almost conversationally, "You're the only one who doesn't want something from me." I didn't correct her. I simply adjusted her blanket. She studied my face for a long time, measuring something invisible. Then she asked, if I left him everything, would he still have anything? It wasn't a riddle. It was an evaluation. I answered honestly. That depends on what everything means. Her mouth curved, satisfied. Not amused, certain. That was the instant I saw the future as clearly as if it were written on glass. My husband mistaking inheritance for power, mistaking paper for permanence, mistaking me for irrelevant. I realized then that I didn't need to fight him, expose him, or warn him. I only needed to let him succeed. Because some victories arrive already carrying their own consequences. I didn't begin planning out of anger. Anger is loud, careless. I began planning the way I balance books, column by column, fact by fact, until the numbers reveal what people try to hide. My degree is in contract law. Not the courtroom kind people dramatize, but the quieter discipline of clauses, contingencies, and definitions. The language that decides ownership long before anyone argues about it. My husband used to joke that my job was reading boring documents all day. He never understood that documents are where power actually lives. After the hospital visit, I requested copies of every financial record tied to our marriage. Joint investments, property titles, insurance beneficiaries. I framed it as routine organization. He signed whatever I placed in front of him, barely glancing, trusting the same habit that had always protected him, assuming I was harmless. At the same time, his aunt's lawyer contacted me once. Just once. Professional. Brief. Confirming a detail she had personally instructed him to verify. I answered carefully, truthfully, precisely. From that point on, I didn't interfere with anything my husband did. I didn't argue, question, or correct. I simply let him move forward, confident and unworried, while I made sure every step he took landed exactly where it needed to. He poured champagne after I signed the papers. Not for us, for himself. The cork popped softly, a celebratory sound he tried to muffle, as if politeness could disguise triumph. Golden bubbles climbed the glass while evening light stretched across the marble floor. I watched the reflections ripple over his shoes, over the envelope that had delivered his confidence. "Thank you for being reasonable," he said, almost gracious. I nodded, slipping my pen back into my bag. Reasonable. The word lingered between us like perfume. 2 days later, the will was read. I wasn't there. I was at work, reviewing a licensing agreement, when my phone vibrated once on the desk. His name. I let it ring. It stopped. Then rang again. And again. Eventually, a message appeared. Call me. Now. I finished the paragraph I was editing before opening it. His voice, when I returned the call, sounded thinner, like fabric stretched too tight. There's a condition, he said. Papers rustled. Someone in the background cleared their throat. The inheritance is held in trust. I don't control it. I pictured his posture collapsing, inch by inch. What kind of condition? I asked gently. Silence. Then, very quietly. It activates only if we're still married. By evening, the news had traveled faster than sympathy. His cousin called first, voice sharpened by barely disguised delight. Is it true? She asked me, not him. I could hear laughter in the room behind her, glasses clinking, someone whispering, he divorced her? The tone people reserve for avoidable disasters. His mother sent a message 10 minutes later. This must be a misunderstanding. Not concern, damage control. Reputation was the family's native language, and scandal its only real fear. My husband called 6 times that night. Each voicemail sounded smaller than the last. The first was urgent, the second persuasive, the third apologetic, the fourth bargaining. By the 6th, he wasn't speaking to me anymore. He was speaking to the version of himself that still believed he was the clever one. I sat at my kitchen table, listening to them in order, hands folded, tea cooling untouched. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt balanced. Like a scale that had finally settled after years of being pressed down on one side. People think revenge is about hurting someone back. It isn't. It's about restoring proportion. And if you're wondering why that matters, it's simple. The moment someone learns they can discard you without consequence is the moment they decide your worth. The divorce finalized on a quiet Thursday morning. No courtroom drama, no trembling hands, no last-minute confessions. Just signatures, stamps, and the soft shuffle of paper closing a chapter that had ended long before the ink dried. When I stepped outside, the air felt unusually clear, as if the world had been waiting for me to notice it without his voice layered over everything. He sent one last message that afternoon. We can fix this. Not us. This. The fortune. The condition. The loss. I didn't reply. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a smaller apartment with wide windows and undecorated walls. I chose each object slowly, deliberately. Chairs I liked, dishes I needed, silence I owned. For the first time in years, nothing around me existed to support someone else's illusion. I heard through quiet channels that he'd tried to contest the will, tried to charm the trustees, tried to explain. Paper, unfortunately for him, doesn't respond to charm. I don't hate him. Hate is a tether, and I am finished being tied to anything that small. Some people chase justice loudly. I learned it arrives best when invited quietly. After all, the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's release.